Greetings, Mavericks and new viewers. Tonight, direct and live from the Maverick News Network World Studios. This is Maverick News with Rick Walker.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to the Maverick News channel. A huge news day today. So much to talk about. We have special guest joining us tonight. Mike McCarrick is back, and he will be bringing us valuable insight into what is going on in the Russia-Ukraine conflict, and specifically what's going on with Poland, because we've seen major developments there over the last couple of days with drones violating Polish airspace. We've seen today troops being moved in Poland up toward the Belarus border. That's a major development as well. In addition to that, we'll be bringing you information on today's news conference involving Prime Minister Mark Carney in Canada, who really laid out a vision for the future, for nation building. It was a major speech, probably should be getting more attention than it is. We'll highlight the first major, and I mean major, projects that Canada will be focusing on in the face of economic friction because of the U.S. tariffs. In addition to that, of course, we're going to be getting into the Charlie Kirk investigation. The manhunt continues. The killer is still at large. A photo or photos of a person of interest, a new person of interest, not the other two that were arrested and subsequently deemed to be not the guy they were looking for. But this is a new photo, and we'll show you what that looks like as well. And 9/11. Today is the anniversary of September 11th, 24 years ago, the attack on the Pentagon, on the Twin Towers in New York, the assault on freedom worldwide. The whole world changed. The before times really, in many respects, demarcated 24 years ago today. And we have that to talk about as well. And with all of that, J.D. Vance, Air Force Two, arriving in Utah to take Charlie Kirk's body home. Here's Air Force Two arriving in Utah. And it continues to be a major developing story tonight. And I'll tell you, I'm sad to report that there's so much anger and hostility displayed online. I think America changed again yesterday with the killing of Charlie Kirk, and the way it has been covered, I think, is part of what has changed the fabric of the nation and maybe the world. And the killing or assassination yesterday, however you care to characterize it, has really only polarized people on both sides of the political spectrum even more. So the violence has really solved nothing. And a lot of people jumping to conclusions, short on facts, long on emotion, on all sides. And even the arrival of Air Force Two can be viewed by some as the politicization of an assassination or a killing in itself. It depends on your perspective on a highly political and emotional story. One of the top news stories for today, and we will dig into the top news of the day when we come back on the other side of this with Mike McCarrick.
Greetings, brave Mavericks. Our quest for truth continues. We go beyond fake news. Together we expose propaganda. Together we pull others out of rabbit holes. We are maverick thinkers. We are all unique individuals, defenders of individual rights and freedoms, credible, trusted, grounded in reality. Maverick News, Maverick News. Defending free speech, free speech. Donate at freedomreporters.com. Do it now. Tomorrow may be too late. Maverick News. The world is watching.
Okay, let's bring our guest in, our co-host tonight, my wingman, again, Mike McCarrick. Hello, Mike.
How are you doing tonight, Rick?
I'm just fine. Maybe you can just introduce yourself again for viewers who maybe have not met you before.
So I am a 22-year U.S. Air Force veteran. I had active duty service in 36 nations on 4 continents, which includes 3 war zones. I have deployed to both Iraq and Afghanistan, several places in both of those nations. And since retiring, I spent 1 year on the leadership board of a organization that directly supported frontline Ukrainian soldiers. The reason I chose to do this after my retirement was between the years of 2017 and 2021, the United States Air Force and the United States State Department sent me through Ukraine 4 times, and as I was senior in the unit at the time, I was part of the planning for at least 4 other missions, including a small corner of the joint U.S. Air Force, Ukrainian Air Force exercise in 2018 that took place inside of Ukraine. If you have any questions for me, you can always reach out. I am on my name on Facebook and Twitter. So if you want any questions, you can do that. It's funny because I don't know if funny is the right word, but today is a special day in my heart, like it does to most Americans and certainly many people in the world. Is 24 years ago today, I was at Fort Gillem, Georgia. And while I had arrived at Fort Gillem that early that morning, like 5 in the morning, as a civilian, by 8 in the morning Eastern Standard Time, I had just completed signing my first 4-year enlistment contract, and I had raised my right hand and sworn my first constitutional oath to support and defend the Constitution. And then an hour later, I was watching the towers fall. So, yeah, that was how my military career started. And so it's a little bit of a special day for me.
I see. Well, I was going to start with the Charlie Kirk stuff, but I think honestly, 9/11 is even more important because it affects its history, it's ongoing. It's I think maybe worth starting there tonight.
It's
You already mentioned it,
and it's still relevant to Ukraine. It's still relevant to our main topics, where the only time NATO, I'm a big supporter of NATO. It's a treaty organization that united former foes. It included France, the United Kingdom, and Germany, among others, that had spent centuries just tearing at each other inside of Europe. There wouldn't be more than a decade or two in European history for several centuries that wouldn't see a war between one or more of those three nations. And they were often horrifying wars. Just before the American Revolution, was it the 7 Years' War or the 30 Years' War? I get those confused, but that was central to the people like Ben Franklin and George Washington. It was central to how they thought about independence and becoming a new nation, was that sort of nasty war in Europe. And NATO has kept the peace in Europe. Western Europe has been free of major conflict since 1945, so 80 years. And that's astonishing. That's an astonishing historical achievement. The only time NATO has various agreements, it's a treaty, a defense alliance between, like to say 31 nations, but I might be one or two off there. That after Finland and Sweden joined, I kind of lost that number. That has various stipulations to it. There's a lot of parts of it that are like, this is how we can operate our militaries jointly and things like that. But one of them is Article 5, which states that an attack on any member nation of NATO by another nation, that defending nation has the right to invoke Article 5, which means every other NATO nation is treaty obligated to defend, to go to war, to defend that NATO nation. And part of the treaty signing process, you cannot become a member of NATO without, as part of the treaty signing and ratification, if you're talking about the US, that treaty must become part of that nation's law. So you're not just violating a treaty if you don't fulfill your obligations, you are violating your own nation's laws.
So we'll come back to that, because that will tie into what we're going to discuss with regard to Poland tonight. There were ceremonies, of course, marking the anniversary of 9/11 in New York and the Pentagon. Yep.
Well, the reason I brought that up is there is only one time in the history of NATO where Article 5 has been invoked, and that was by the United States on 9/11. Or maybe the 12th. I don't remember the exact date we invoked it. But obviously we had been attacked in a major way. There were billions of dollars in damage and thousands of innocent lives lost. So yes, that was a direct attack on the United States and a member nation, and Canada, along with all the other NATO nations, came to our aid.
Right. Here's what happened at the Pentagon today with the ceremony there. President Trump was in attendance.
Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated.
We'll just little of this.
Ladies and gentlemen,
speaker.
General Dan Kane, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff.
Good morning, Mr. President, Madam First Lady, Secretary Hegseth, members of the President's Cabinet, and leaders from across government, the military, distinguished visitors, veterans, first responders, fellow Americans, and most importantly, the families of our fallen from that day. Thank you for being here to gather in remembrance, to grieve our nation's loss, and draw strength from the heroism Americans demonstrated that day. September 11th reminds us that even in the darkest of times, American strength endures. And if attacked, we will immediately fight back. 24 years ago, on a beautiful morning here in Washington, American Airlines Flight 77 took off at 8:20 a.m. from Dulles International Airport with 59 passengers and crew bound for Los Angeles. Here at the Pentagon, soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, Coast Guardmen, and civilians began what they thought would be an ordinary day of service. They kissed their loved ones goodbye, dropped kids off at daycare, and commuted in here for another day of duty, having no idea what they were about to face. 200 miles north of here, Al-Qaeda terrorists took control of 2 aircraft, American Airlines Flight 11 and United Airlines Flight 175. At 8:46 a.m., the first plane was flown deliberately into the North Tower. And minutes later, the second airplane was flown into the second tower. We all knew at that very moment that our world had changed, that America was at war. And then at 9:37 a.m., just moments ago, 24 years ago, American Airlines Flight 77 ripped through the west wall here at the Pentagon, where our flag outside the building now hangs. And this ground that we stand upon became hollowed. 2,977 were lost in the attacks that morning. The conventional wisdom is that our nation went to war weeks later in Afghanistan. The truth is, we went to war immediately, and America started to fight back before the attack was even over. In New York City, firefighters, police officers, paramedics, first responders, and everyday citizens charged into towers, climbing hundreds and hundreds of flights of stairs to rescue their fellow Americans. And right here in this courtyard at the Pentagon, as flames filled the corridors and smoke followed, service members and civilians went into that flame to save their fellow teammates. They covered their faces with t-shirts rolled in water to shield their skin and pushed through the fire and rubble. They carried the wounded out and they went back in again and again and again and again until others had to stop them from going back. And even as this building burned, the Pentagon never shut down. Survivors organized and thousands went to work to defend our nation. And there were 40 first responders on United Airlines Flight 93. 40 heroes who, unlike us who wear the cloth of our nation, never took an oath to protect and defend our nation. They just got on an airplane. And knowing full well what was happening, they found the courage and commitment to run forward in that airplane, sacrificing themselves over the fields of Pennsylvania to save Americans that they would never meet and never know. And I, for one, think of them every day and the gift of courage that they gave my squadron mates and I on that day. So as we come here together, let us reflect and let us never forget. Let us never forget the families who've shown us what true courage looks like as they continue to persevere through the years after. And let us all be inspired by the determination of those brave heroes who showed us that day what America is all about. And let anybody who ever considers attacking the United States remember those examples as well, and the great American warrior spirit that was shown that day. Thank you very much And now it's my distinct honor to introduce our nation's Secretary of War. May we never forget our fallen. May we never forget our deployed. Ladies and gentlemen, the Secretary of War, the Honorable Pete Hegseth.
So I'm interested in hearing more about your personal experience on that day, Mike. It was your first day in the service, and what happened after you? What were your emotions? What was going through your mind when all of this was happening?
Well, it was funny because I was already married at the time. I was 20 years old. I went in late. When my wife and I had decided to join back in April of that year, one of the things that we talked about, my wife and I both served. I don't know if you knew that. My wife retired after 20 years in 2021, but she went through basic training in July. She started in July. So she had just finished basic training, and then I went. But one of the things that we talked about is I'm like, we're at peace. It's not like we're going to war anytime soon. And of course, I have never been more wrong. So I was I was so new that I hadn't even been yelled at by a drill instructor yet. And we were what they call MEPS, military, get ready for your acronyms. MEPS is some sort of like military entrance, something or other. But it's your final step. You've already done the medical stuff. You've already done the recruiter. You've already done all of the other steps. It's your final step. And the intent for MEPS is that you show up, you sign your contract, you raise your right hand, and you ship off to basic training. We did not ship off. The entire nation was locked down. I don't know if you remember this. I'm not a huge Dick Cheney fan, but one of the things that he was absolutely 100% correct on is he grounded every single airplane in the United States. The only airplanes allowed to fly were military missions in defense of the United States. And so we were grounded for several days. So there were no airplanes. Air Force basic trainings in San Antonio, Texas, and I was in Atlanta, Georgia, which you would normally take a flight. They didn't know what to do with us because obviously when you're attacked, all of a sudden everything gets locked down. The security presence position goes to high alert. I could use more acronyms. Force protection Delta is the level of you are currently in a war with incoming hostile fire expected or already occurring. So the entire military worldwide went to force protection Delta. So I sat there for 9 hours because we couldn't go anywhere and we were safe where we were. Eventually we got on a lovely 25-hour bus ride. And then I got yelled out by drill instructors. But the entire time in basic, I went to basic training knowing we had been attacked and knowing exactly nothing else. Then you go into this black hole of basic training where the purpose of basic training is to take a civilian who might or might not have, even talked mean to a squirrel, and turn them into a military person. Basically, they take you apart and then put you to get back together psychologically. Somewhat physically, but if you're not in shape before basic training, you're not going to finish basic training. So it was normally there's a news blackout. You might not even get mail for a week. That if you know military life, mail is one of those things they don't mess with, but early on in basic training, you might not get mail. And so it was a news blackout. My drill instructor violated rules because he's like, man, these people, they went to basic training not knowing anything. So he would clip news articles and paste them to one of the boards where we slept so that everybody could at least have something that they knew about what was going on. It was a very interesting time. one of my high school friends, Heather Penny. I don't know if you know that name, but she was an F-16 pilot. She was, I'd like to say she was a reservist or a guardsman up in Massachusetts at the time, but I might be misremembering that detail. She was ordered. She was on the alert. She was put one of two pilots on alert, where that's just part of our defense posture, where an active duty Air Force base is going to have planes on the ground but ready to take off at a moment's notice. So she was one of the alert pilots, but because it was a peacetime setting, the aircraft were unarmed. There were no missiles. From what I have heard, the cannon wasn't even loaded. They had fuel, and that was it. And she and her wingman were ordered to take off because there was one more plane in the air that they couldn't account for. And she was vectored onto that airplane. This is the one that crashed in Pennsylvania. She was vectored onto that airplane and ordered to take it down by any means necessary. And since she didn't have any weapons, that meant ramming the jet. That's what she was ordered to do. It's a well-known story in Air Force circles, but not a lot of people know that that's what happened that day. That there were people that was the order they were carrying out. Obviously, she's still alive, but still, it was an odd day.
Yeah, and then everything that came after. I mean, your whole career was shaped
at war.
by
Mm-hmm.
what happened at that moment. Yeah.
One of the last things that I did as a member of the military was in August and September of 2021, so 20-ish years later. Trump had negotiated the peace treaty with the Taliban, and it was Biden's job to finalize the evacuation that was a bit rushed. But I was at Ramstein Air Base in Germany, which is one of the central hubs for NATO. It's a big cargo base. It's right in the middle of everything, which makes sense so it can be a hub. And I was processing evacuees. It was tent city on the flight line. Half the flight line had been taken over by tents. At any one time, there was 10 to 15,000 Afghani evacuees on the ground at Ramstein before we could figure out what to do with them. And I was what they call an NCOIC. That's a non-commissioned officer in charge of what pod 3. There were 5 pods, and it was just separated so that we could figure out how to deal with it. Cut it up so it's small chunks that you can deal with. And it was my job to organize the welcome for the flights, because who knows what they were arriving with. Some didn't even have pants on because they literally just picked up and left. And so it was making sure that they had proper clothing, taking care of the kids. Do you need a meal? Here's a bed to sleep in while we figure it out. And it was my job to organize that. What the military calls 12 and 12s. I worked 5 days of 12 and 12s, which is you do 12 hours on duty, 12 hours off duty, and that's your life. As long as you are doing 12 and 12s, that's your life. And that's what I did 20 years later.
I remember how united the country was immediately after 9/11. I don't ever recall it being more unified before or since, and I'm not sure how the country has become so polarized since then and so dysfunctional in many ways. What are your thoughts?
There are various long-term trends in American politics. I mean, you don't necessarily need to go that far in depth, but there has been an increasing polarization, because it's not like the 50s and the 60s were exactly united America either. And if you look at the 1930s, we usually don't even think about the 1930s except for like these odd thoughts, Grapes of Wrath, Dust Bowl, things like that, Hoovervilles, Great Depression. But the 1930s were severely divided. One of the things people don't realize is in Madison Square Gardens, the big boxing arena in New York City, there was a Nazi rally. with big pictures of George Washington up behind the stage with like the swastika and everything. Henry Ford of Ford Motor Company and Charles Lindbergh, the first person to cross the Atlantic, both received medals from the Reich. It was a really weird time in America in the 1930s. And we complain about some of the people today that ride the border between journalism and not journalism. But there was a Canadian born, but he was living in America, Father Charles Coughlin, who would put a lot of the extreme right-wing people in America today to shame. Some of the stuff that came out of his mouth was insane. And so it's like what I'd like to say was Mark Twain, but don't quote me on that, history doesn't repeat, but it sure does rhyme a lot. So yeah, Civil War, 1861 to 1865 wasn't exactly united America. We actually, went to war with each other. So America, one of the geniuses and one of the weaknesses, it's simultaneously strength and weakness of the United States, is that people argue. People are going to be people no matter where they are, what government they have, what religion they are. People are people. They're going to argue. They're going to bicker. They're going to be mad at each other. They're going to help each other out. They're going to be charitable. They're going to be not charitable. America deliberately harnessed this into our form of government, where we've got three separate co-equal checks and balances sections of our government that argue with each other. That sort of debate and acrimony was harnessed into our form of government. So we have made argument and disagreement into our form of government in many ways. So this is not unusual in American history, the extreme part that we are in right now. I could give you more that would reveal some of my partisan leanings. One of the villains in this story is Newt Gingrich when he took over in 1994 as Speaker of the House. Prior to 1994, it was very usual, very common for Democrats and Republicans to jointly sponsor bills. Famously, President Reagan and Republican conservative and Democrat Speaker of the House Tip O'Neill were good friends. They would meet weekly, if not more often, usually over a brandy or a scotch, and just discuss things. They were friends. They were close. They talked to each other. On the Supreme Court, Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Scalia were the same way. They would go to the opera together. But in 1994, Newt Gingrich instituted I don't remember when the phrase came around, but it's now called rhino hunting, where if you cooperated with a Democrat or if you co-sponsored a bill or if you didn't toe the line, you were hunted. You earned a primary opponent. Your funding was cut for re-elections. You were sidelined or kicked out of committees. And so there was deliberate actions, starting with Newt Gingrich, that made what had formerly been commonplace across the aisle cooperation, if not friendship, increasingly less common. And we might still have one or two of those middle of the road people around, but it's just not as common anymore.
Well, President Trump yesterday delivered a speech commenting on Charlie Kirk's death, and I didn't find that it was very unifying. I thought it was very political. I was disappointed in it. But with that being said, I think it's probably appropriate for us to at least play a brief segment from the president's address today at the Pentagon on 9/11.
Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you very much. Before we begin, let me express the horror and grief so many Americans at the heinous assassination of Charlie Kirk have felt. Charlie was a giant of his generation, a champion of liberty, and an inspiration to millions and millions of people. Our prayers are with his wonderful wife, Eric, and his beautiful children. Fantastic people they are. We miss him greatly, yet I have no doubt that Charlie's voice and the courage he put into the hearts of countless people, especially young people, will live on. I'm pleased to announce that I will soon be awarding Charlie Kirk posthumously the Presidential Medal of Freedom. The date of the ceremony will be announced, and I can only guarantee you one thing, that we will have a very big crowd. Very, very big. Thank you, my fellow Americans. 84 years ago this morning, the banks of the Potomac were filled with the clamor of construction workers who broke ground on the building now known as the Pentagon on September 11th, 1941. At the time, it was the biggest building ever built. From that moment forward, this structure stood as a monument to American strength, power, and cherished American freedom. Exactly 6 decades later, on September 11th, 2001, those same walls, built with the sweat and muscle, blood of our parents and grandparents, were scarred by flame and shaken by terror as our country came face to face with pure evil. On that fateful day, savage monsters attacked the very symbols of our civilization. Yet here in Virginia and in New York and in the skies over Pennsylvania, Americans did not hesitate. They stood on their feet and they showed the world that we will never yield, we will never bend, we will never give up, and our great American flag will never, ever fail. That terrible morning 24 years ago, time itself stood still. The laughter of school children fell silent. The rush of our traffic came to an absolute halt. And for 2,977 innocent souls and their families, the entire world came crashing down so suddenly. In the quarter of a century since those acts of mass murder, 9/11 family members have felt the weight of missed birthdays and empty bedrooms, journals left unfinished, and dreams left unfulfilled. To every member that still feels a void every day of your lives, the First Lady and I unite with you in sorrow. And today, as one nation, we renew our sacred vow that we will never forget September 11th, 2001. Amid the horror of that morning, some used cell phones and office lines to whisper their final words to those who mattered most. They whispered indeed. At 8:59 a.m. aboard United Flight 175, Brian Sweeney called his wife, Julie. He told her, "Do good, go have good times. I totally love you. I'll see you again. I'll meet you up there." 4 minutes later, his plane hit the south tower of the World Trade Center. At 9:12 a.m. aboard American Airlines Flight 77, Renee May called her mom. Just the day before, Renee had learned that she was 7 weeks pregnant, but she never got the chance to share the news. She simply said, "I love you, Mom." 25 minutes later, Renee's plane struck the Pentagon. So violent, a strike it was. At 9:53 a.m. aboard United Flight 93, Elizabeth Waineo called her stepmom. They're getting ready to break into the cockpit. What do I do? I love you so much. They're going to break in. 10 minutes later, Flight 93 ended in the hallowed field near Shanksville, Pennsylvania. At 10:25 a.m., Tom McGinnis was trapped on the 92nd floor of the North Tower when he told his wonderful wife, Elena, on the phone, There are people jumping from the floors above us. If we get out of here, it'll be a total miracle. I love you, darling. Take care of Caitlin, beautiful daughter. 3 minutes later, the tower fell. Out of the ash, we witnessed the awesome power of that incredible love. We've seen it rise again. Out of the wreckage, we watched unbelievable courage suddenly take form. And out of the darkness, we saw the timeless truth of American character shine for the world to see. In America, we take blows, but we never buckle. We bleed, but we do not bow. And we defy the fear, endure the flames, and emerge from the crucible of every hardship stronger, prouder, and greater than ever before. Last year, we were a dead country. Now we have the hottest country anywhere in the world. In New York, there were heroes like Chuck Costello, a 46-year-old elevator mechanic, and a member of the Knights of Columbus. He selflessly ran into the World Trade Center to free people trapped in the elevators. His body was not found until the following January, deep under the debris. While going through his belongings, Chuck's widow, Mary, a phenomenal woman, discovered a personal prayer written in his own words, "Help me to light the way for those in the dark, and when I enter the darkness, let me not panic, but patiently wait to remember the light." Beautiful words. When the time came, Chuck ran boldly into the darkness of hell on earth, and now he shines in the light of heaven above. We remember him this morning. That day we learned that the American heroic spirit was all around us. We saw it in the police officers, the great firefighters, the service members here at the Pentagon, and in the hearts of every American who answered history's call. One such hero was Army Sergeant First Class Steve Workman, who was on the edge of the impact zone when this incredible Pentagon was hit. He was right there. After leading hundreds of people to escape routes, Steve turned back and plunged into the inferno itself. Pushing through the debris, he came upon a severely burned Navy lieutenant, the only survivor from the Navy Command Center. Only one. The wounded lieutenant looked into Steve's soul and said, "Don't let me die." Steve replied, "I won't. I've got you. Just hang on." He wheeled the lieutenant out of the wreckage on the back of a maintenance cart before getting in the ambulance and taking him to Walter Reed Hospital. That man Steve saved, Lieutenant Kevin Schaefer, went on to join the elite team of CIA operatives who located Osama bin Laden. Steve, you're an American hero. We appreciate it. We appreciate what you've gone through. Please stand. Please stand. Where are you? Oh, good-looking man. You're a good-looking guy. You remember that day. You remember that day. Good. Thank you very much, Steve. That was something. That was something. In the years that followed, America's warriors avenged our fallen and sent an unmistakable message to every enemy around the world. If you attack the United States of America, we will hunt you down and we will find you. We'll go all over this sometimes magnificent earth. We will crush you without mercy and we will triumph without question. That's why we named the former Department of Defense the Department of War. It will be different. We won the First World War. We won the Second World War. We won everything before that and in between. And then we decided to change the name. Well, now we have it back to where we all want it. Everybody wanted it. Everybody is so happy to have it back. You will fail and America will win, win, win. The enemy will always fail. 24 years have passed since that Tuesday morning in September, and an entire generation of Americans have come of age in a totally different world. While they cannot remember the agony of that day, they are carrying on the legacy of those who lost. Around 8:30 a.m. on the morning of the attacks, Army Lieutenant Colonel Kip Taylor sent an email to his friends and family describing the joys of fatherhood and his excitement for the upcoming birth of his unborn son.
So,
He wrote,
any thoughts on any of that, Mike?
Well, for Trump, that was actually a pretty good speech. He had a couple of moments where I did, kind of things, but there's a lot of things that he said that the vast majority of Americans would agree with. You come after us, we're going to go after you. And that's, and I'm not just saying that from military perspective. There are a lot of people that I was the last group that went through basic training that swore in before September 11th, before the towers fell. Yeah, it was just an hour before, but everyone that came after me signed that line and raised their right hand, knowing they were at war, knowing that they could go at any time, not knowing what they were getting into, but they signed on the dotted line. They raised their right hand and said, take me, I'm ready. But it wasn't just the military folks. The president actually reminded me, President Trump reminded me that what took down flight in Pennsylvania were the civilians on board the airplane. They're not going to take it. This is not okay. And we're Americans, like Edward R. Murrow said, we are not descended from cowardly people. And they took their own courage in their hands and did something about it. So, it's the firefighters, all sorts of civilians on 9/11 did amazing things. So while my experience is military, I absolutely want to be clear that there were a lot of people that found their courage that day.
With that, we will take a break. We'll come back and get into the other top news stories of the day. Stay with us.
Maverick News. The world is watching.
So I'm really glad you're here tonight because your background, your expertise, it all ties into, I think, every story we're going to be touching on tonight. So I'm grateful to have your wisdom and insight here to share with our viewers. Even this story about Charlie Kirk. We have a person of interest, a new person of interest.
Yep, that's the one that I saw just in the last few hours.
I'm sorry, what was that, Mike?
Sorry, this is the one that I saw just in the last few hours. Did my volume go down?
No, I just, there was
Gotcha.
just some ambient sound there that I couldn't understand you. So, yeah, I guess this is the guy that they're looking for now. Maybe. Yeah. I have to say, I am I'm disappointed in the kind of work that the FBI has been doing so far on this. First, they arrested two other people identified by Kash Patel as "we've got the guy," posted on social media, basically, and in both cases, they were cleared, and it wasn't the guy they were looking for. Now we have this image that has been released. So
Well,
they're calling this guy a person of interest. What are your thoughts?
well, funny you brought up the performance of the FBI because I mean the FBI has certainly an interesting history, but there was a trial that started today. There was a suit brought by terminated FBI agents. I don't know how many people were paying attention, but Trump directed that each and every single FBI agent that had anything to do with the investigations into Trump himself for the classified documents at Mar-a-Lago or any other thing that he was doing must be immediately terminated, which is completely anti everything that America I knew stood for, because these were people complain about government workers all the time, but these people were nonpartisan. If they were like me, I joined in 2001 and I retired in 2023. I served 4 presidents, 2 from each party, and they have the same history. They served multiple presidents. Their job was to support and defend the Constitution and serve the nation. The president was at various points might or might not be their leader, but we have this tradition of a distinct and separated Department of Justice and FBI. And so Trump violating that's a big deal. These terminated FBI agents are part of the gutting of the FBI. And one of the things that came out in evidence presented today in court was that the stark difference in competence of leadership at the FBI starting this year between 2025 and 2024 is just, there's no competition. It's like all of a sudden the FBI became a clown car. And this isn't even debated fact. This is evidence entered into the court where it has Kash Patel and various other people just obviously like, I can't actually be the FBI director. I'm just, watching Donald Trump's tweets and going with that. So it doesn't necessarily surprise me that an agency gutted, and when you gut it in this manner, every other agent, everybody that still has a job is going to be, man, if I do anything out of step, am I going to be the next person to go? So you've got a lot of people that should be focused on their work, but they're looking over their back to see if somebody's about to stab them. So figuratively. Bumbling I would kind of expect. Now, the other side of that is this like or don't like Charlie Kirk. I think assassination is the correct term. This was clearly an assassination. Depending on what the shooter is, this might be an act of terrorism, because the definition of terrorism is using violence to achieve some sort of political goal. I don't know what the shooter was trying to do. We don't know who the shooter is yet. We have no idea. So that label of terrorism is a bit premature, but it was certainly an assassination. He was smart. If it was a he, statistically, this is going to be a white male, the way those things go, probably younger than 40, that statistically that's probably going to be the culprit. And he was smart, in direct contrast to the idiot that somehow managed to nick Trump's ear last summer, who obviously didn't even know the first thing about weapons, chose the wrong weapon. He had a short-barreled AR. I don't know if people are aware of the difference between an actual rifle and an assault rifle, but an assault rifle is semi-automatic, which means you don't have to recock it on after each shot, or like the bolt actions where you have to do that. So you can just pull the trigger and pull the trigger and pull the trigger. Importantly, aside from that semi-automatic feature, the important things for this topic are that the rounds, the bullets that an assault weapon shoots are intermediate in charge between a sidearm or a pistol and a full rifle. What that means is that they have less gunpowder, less propellant in backing up the bullet, shooting the bullet out, which means that bullet will have less kinetic energy, muzzle velocity will be lower, things like that. What that means is that, and then also on the assault rifle, the barrel is going to be shorter, because after World War II, when we had battle rifles, was the term for the M1 Garand and the Lee Enfield and the whatever Mauser the Germans were using, the Mosin Nagant and the Soviet Union, all those famous World War II battle rifles, had full charge rounds, but they also had very long barrels. Most of those barrels were at least 20 inches long, and some of them were 26 inches long. And that will give you, if the rifle is well built, that'll give you an accurate rifle out to 100 meters. 1,000 meters, a full kilometer, just on iron sights. A decent shot a decent marksman can shoot accurately at a kilometer using a battle rifle with a long barrel and full charge rounds. Just on iron sights. You don't even need a telescope for that. Why? I've done that. So the assault rifle will have a shorter barrel. The idiot last summer that took some shots in Trump's general direction was using a short barrel AR. The barrel was between 14 and 16 inches long, which is sub performance for the NATO standard 5.56 round of the AR shoot. The optimum length for the barrel should be 20 inches on the original M16. But that 20 inches on that intermediate round that is below a full rifle charge, is only accurate on a 20-inch barrel out to 500 meters. And on that short barrel that the guy used last summer, maybe 100 meters. This came out of a World War II study that said most accurate shots in actual combat were less than 100 meters, and that the extra range, the weight, the propellant, the cost to build the longer, bigger, more powerful rifle, and all of the rounds was just completely unnecessary, because that was not how we were using any of the rifles in combat. That nearly all round shot during World War II were less than 100 meters. And so why are you carrying around the extra weight of the long barrel and the full charge rounds? Because if you can lower the weight of the barrel and lower the weight of the rounds, that means that each infantryman can carry more rounds and the rifle won't be so heavy. Which is important. Heavy is important to infantry if you've ever had to carry around your gear in a combat zone. So the assault rifle is just, I'm surprised he hit anything, to be quite honest, last summer. The weapon that they recovered from the Charlie Kirk assassination, that is possibly the murder weapon,
which they just found. I think it was earlier today, or
yes, they found it in a wooded area just off of the university campus. It might or might not be the weapon, but I think given the circumstances, it probably is. It's a bolt action hunting rifle, which means it's got a long barrel, probably 22 to 26 inches. It's got a full charge round. On that length, it could still be the 5.56 or 22 millimeter round. Those are actually decent rounds. It could be a 30-06. It could be that's a bigger round. But this person was smart. They knew line of sight. They had done their research on Charlie Kirk rallies, knew he would be under a tent and all that kind of stuff. They must have scouted out the area beforehand to know that they'd be able to get line of sight. There are those pictures of somebody on a rooftop. That is almost certainly where the shot came from. The shot was taken from 200 meters away, which the weapon used last summer against Trump is just hopeless at 200 meters. But this full charge long barrel rifle would be accurate, like I said, out to 1,000 meters. At 200 meters, you can be very accurate. From the audio, I only heard one round. That might or might not be true. It might have been more than one round. I only heard one. And he got a headshot at 200 meters with one round. That means that this person knew his way around weapons. I don't want to say he had military training because the gun culture and the hunting culture in America, there are a lot of people that never served that are very accurate shots with hunting rifles. But yeah, this was calculated. It was planned. It was somebody that was a good shot. He was not a newbie at weapons, and chose the correct weapon. This was pre-planned, it was premeditated, and it was deliberate. So where this all ends up, that is all true.
So they're looking for this person of interest. Bo Mason, the commissioner of Utah's Department of Public Safety, is saying the suspect appears to be of college age, and they're saying good video of this suspect, and
under
he was
30.
Yep.
Yeah, under 30 years old, white male. Looked like he was in decent shape.
Yeah. Here's a clip from Bo Mason.
Through all that work last night, we were able to make a few breakthroughs. We were able to track the movements of the shooter. Starting at 11:52 a.m., the subject arrived on campus, shortly away from campus. We have tracked his movements onto the campus, through the stairwells, up to the roof, across the roof to a shooting location. After the shooting, we were able to track his movements as he moved to the other side of the building, jumped off of the building, and fled off of the campus and into a neighborhood. Our investigators have worked through those neighborhoods, contacting anybody they can with doorbell cameras, witnesses, and have thoroughly worked through those communities, trying to identify any leads. We do have good video footage of this individual. We are not going to release that at this time. We are working through some technologies and some ways to identify this individual. If we are unsuccessful, we will reach out to you as the media and we will push that publicly to help us identify them. But we are confident in our abilities right now, and we would like to move forward in a manner that keeps everyone safe and moves this process appropriately.
Comment?
Well, it seems like they certainly at this stage they're starting to do it right. And Utah did not gut. I don't know if you guys are aware, but just like the FBI is the Federal Bureau of Investigations, each American state has their statewide version of that. And it's usually like Utah would probably be UBI or something like that. Yeah. CBI for Colorado right next door, things like that. So those people never got gutted by Trump, and they are probably just as incompetent and professional today as they were a year ago. It sounds like they're doing all the right things, rounding up any camera footage, anything like that. One of the Bumbles, there was a nearby airport. It was a 5 or 10 minute drive from the campus that they didn't shut down, and there was a plane that took off that is of interest right now. I don't know if they'll ever find this guy. So that would be a really bizarre outcome to this if they can't find him.
Yeah. Now, you said that the shooter got a headshot, but I think what you mean is head area, because
yes.
he was actually struck. It looks like do you think this is accurate, that it hit his bulletproof vest and then fragmented and went through his neck? Do you think that's
possible? What I saw was a headshot gone wrong. It was a little bit low, but it was possible that he was shooting for body mass, which is one of the better shooting techniques. Now, if you have an accurate weapon that's good out to 1,000 meters and you're only shooting at 200, then a headshot is not an unreasonable choice. And snipers in Ukraine do this regularly. But body mass is certainly a bigger target. You're more likely to get a hit. And like I said, this shooter obviously knew what he was doing. So him going for body mass, yes, that's a possibility.
So much weird stuff around this. Anytime something like this happens, anything political, of course, conspiracy theories, crazy stuff comes out, videos, analyzing this video. which is graphic and horrific. Just the fact that it's even circulating online, I think changes society. It's not like it was when I was working in network television. That stuff, the
Yeah.
graphic footage of him, the actual assassination, never would see the light of day
Which
on
is
television.
it's odd because I've been in the military for so long, so I've seen direct predator feeds and things like that. Been in weird areas of the world. And today, because I have personal friends in the Ukrainian military on the front lines in combat on a daily basis, they either send me video or they send me a link to Telegram. So I see several videos like this every day. So yeah, but that's in Ukraine, not in the United States.
Yeah, it's interesting because even when I was working in television, if we showed, you could show war footage from another country halfway around the world, but if you showed a dead body from a car accident locally, people would freak out. But the war footage was okay, but that stuff
Hmm.
wasn't, because the distance psychologically, people didn't react the same way.
Mhm.
Even, I could tell you a lot of stories about the way the public reacts to this stuff, but how how do you think this changes or affects the public and the way people, do you think it's changing people psychologically to be exposed to graphic footage like this?
Um, that's a difficult question. So I certainly do not buy any of the stuff that in the 90s when they were talking about violent video games and music. I grew up as a metalhead. I very much enjoy first person shooter video games. It's one of the ways I unwind. It's just a video game. I mean, I grew up on Bugs Bunny, where people were getting smashed and hammered and blown apart all the time, and that was my childhood laugh track of when I was a kid underneath 10 years old. So um, I don't buy necessarily, but we risk when it's actual real violence as opposed to the artistic land of cartoons and video games and music. We risk a numbing effect because one of the things that I've certainly noticed in myself and in my brothers and sisters in the military and also my friends in Ukraine is that things can become the new normal a lot faster than you might realize. So for instance, on 9/11, the level of rage inside of me, and then again in February of 2022, when my friends were being attacked by Russia, the level of rage inside of me. People are capable of a lot. Good, nice, kind people are capable of a lot. And so the new normal is certainly something that we might expect. The partisan slant on this, because Charlie Kirk was not universally loved, obviously, since somebody assassinated him, but he said a lot of things that justifiably made a lot of people mad. And the fallout from that is happening now, where, so for instance, he was on a college campus, very controversial person that was hosted by a college campus. This is something that American universities exist to do. We've met this challenge to various degrees of success through our history, but controversial people, freedom of speech, academic freedom on college campuses is important to most Americans. And so Charlie Kirk having an appearance at a university, that sort of free speech should remain important to Americans. But a lot of universities are now looking at canceling this sort of event, probably moving it indoors, metal detectors, things like that, if they continue to host it. without going into too many details, a lot of Charlie Kirk's fans have been threatening bomb threats, assassination threats, other sorts of violent threats against historically black colleges. At least 5 of them were on lockdown today.
Yeah.
And so the aftermath of it makes you start to think who, because the shooter, obviously this was premeditated. That didn't just happen. He didn't find the correct place to take the shot from. He didn't choose his weapon. He didn't do all sorts of things this deliberately without thinking about this for weeks, if not months, maybe longer. The aftermath that we're seeing already, and the polarizing figure that Charlie Kirk was, makes me start to think who. But so there's a lot of potentially ugly future from this. The new normal is one of them. The vitriol is one of them. I really hope that it doesn't force otherwise good people into violent acts that they wouldn't have otherwise done. I really hope that is not true. But because the threats to the historically black colleges were obviously, keyboard warriors as opposed to real threats, but they have to take them seriously at this point.
So, I mean, I see this has driven an even deeper wedge in between people, and it resulted in more polarization. And then online, on TikTok, on X in particular, we're seeing videos like this.
Ding dong, the witch is dead. To everyone saying that it was such a senseless, violent act. I want you to remind yourself that it was God's plan. I mean, really, it was actually his fault, because, he should have been wearing, a bulletproof neck brace or something. I cannot believe he walked out the house without it. I mean, really, you have to be aware of what you're wearing in public so that, people don't target you. And you don't become a victim. So I guess this is just another example of God's plan in action. It was not a senseless act of violence. This was God's plan. Happy hump day, y'all!
So some of that was actually satire. I am not 100% sure that lady actually believed everything that she said. Satire and parody, because a lot of what she said actually echoed what Charlie Kirk has said. Within the last 2 years, Charlie Kirk started saying that because of his version of gun rights, what he sees as what the Second Amendment means, and this is out of Charlie Kirk's own mouth, that gun deaths are necessary to maintain that freedom, that school children will die, and those are necessary deaths. This is Charlie Kirk. And so the weirdness of him being shot by somebody that was well steeped in American gun culture, that knew his weapon and was accurate and premeditated and all that kind of stuff, is a little bit odd. So, and Charlie Kirk was big on the Christian nationalism. So I'm not sure how much of that video was honest and how much of it was satire.
Well, there's just a ton of this stuff out there. It's
certainly ill-timed. So,
well, yeah, I mean, some people celebrating the assassination of.
Well, and it should be obvious to your listeners, I am not a Charlie Kirk fan, but an assassination and a potential act of domestic terrorism inside of the United States is not something that anybody should be cheering. I don't care who the target is. I don't care who the perpetrator is. I think this is as wrong as the shots on Trump, the attack on Paul Pelosi, the arson at Governor Shapiro of Pennsylvania's house, the kidnapping plot against Governor Gretchen Whitmer, the July assassinations of Minnesota Democratic politicians, the shootings at Jon Stewart the last day or two did a much better job of this list. But You've got, all of the school shootings, Uvalde, and just everybody. There's been, even the day, like an hour or two after Charlie Kirk was shot, there was a high school in Colorado where 3 students were shot, and nobody's paying attention to that because, like I said about the new normal, it was, oh yes, just another school shooting. And I hope you heard the air quotes in there. That 3 high school students being shot in an act of senseless terror and violence, we don't even pay attention to, even though Charlie Kirk is getting the headlines. So we've got a weird, skewed priority and moral compass going on right now, and I hope we do better. But
and here are these quotes from Charlie Kirk from years gone by. He says, "You will never live in a society where you have an armed citizenry and you won't have a single gun death." He goes on, "That is nonsense. It's drivel, but I think it's worth it. I think it's worth to have a cost of, unfortunately, some gun deaths every single year so that we can have the Second Amendment to protect our other God-given rights. That is a prudent deal. It is rational. Nobody talks like this. They live in a complete alternate universe." And adds, "Having an armed citizenry comes with a price, and that is part of liberty." Other solutions he mentioned included armed guards at school buildings. He's talking about school shootings here.
Yep, he's rationalizing the shooting of school children.
Yeah, and so I can certainly understand why, you would take exception to that.
Well, from my military background, when you shoot children, that's a war crime. So
yeah, but to be absolutely clear, you don't wish death upon anyone.
No, like I said, this is an assassination. It's a potential act of domestic terrorism. Whoever did this needs to get caught. He needs to be brought to justice. What justice decides to do with them will be up to the court system. And like I said, what I really hope is that this doesn't spark more acts of assassination, domestic terrorism, things like that. That's the worst possible outcome, is that this sparks yet more.
Yeah, I fear that it will, because even yesterday, when President Trump addressed the nation on this particular subject, it seemed like his address to me was very political, and he basically blamed the Democrats, the radical left, I think was the phrase that he used again, as he often has, continues to. And then we're seeing a lot of people, I don't remember which politician it was today, saying the Democrats own this. And the reporter in a media scrum asked, I can't remember her name, but he asked about these other incidents, as I did last night on the program, highlighted it's really, this political violence is happening on both sides. You've had Democrat politicians assassinated as well within months.
Yeah, in July.
Yeah. So this is on both sides, and it is obviously terrible.
And the guy that shot the Minnesota politicians, he killed I can't remember her name. Started with an H, but it was her, Hoffman, her husband, their dog. He had shot and wounded several others. He had a list that he was going house to house. His list was dozens of people long, and they just managed to catch him before he got to the end. He had this was the guy that was pretending to be a police officer, so that when he knocked on somebody's door, there would be this automatic level of trust. And so this kind of corrosion, it's bad. If there's one political stance that I would hope a lot of people can get behind, it's there's crazies on the left, there's crazies on the right, that the people in the middle, if you're left of center, if you're right of center, we need to get together. The centrists need to actually be sensible and find some sort of rational way forward.
And here's looks like we've got new video here too. Security camera footage showing the alleged Charlie Kirk assassin just minutes before the shooting released from a homeowner.
One of the Ring cameras, yeah. Oh, the homeowner released it, not the investigators.
Yeah, I'm going to run it, but
Interesting.
keep in mind that this may not.
Yeah,
I don't know if this is even coming from authorities.
so Americans, it's possibly valid. Americans feel a lot of freedoms, but in this case, if the civilian non-investigator, non-law enforcement is releasing this, technically that might actually be a crime. It could be considered obstruction of justice if they're releasing this kind of a thing. They might have been under a legal gag order. I hope they were, but it could be valid. It could be somebody being an idiot, but it also could
look
be
at it before
weird.
I run it. I don't know. It's a wide angle shot, and it's been released on TMZ.
Who knows if it's valid or not?
I don't know. The other thing that I don't know is if it's, and this is happening every time there's any kind of an incident like this, the conspiracy stuff starts, right? The crazy stuff starts. The other videos come out, analysis of the assassination video, and of course it started almost immediately, before that you couldn't within a heartbeat. The conspiracy stuff started with this shooting, and there's this whole thing about the ring on his finger. Have you seen that?
No. That's weird.
So yeah, and I mean, I looked at it and I was like, what the hell?
Yeah,
so as he's falling backwards, and I'm if there's a close up, I'll show you, but I don't want to show the actual assassination video. I haven't shown it. I'm inclined not to. I think it's
if people want to watch it, it's out there.
That's right. That I said, if you want to go find it, it's out there. It's easy. It pops right up because it's being shared. And I could have had probably millions of hits like other people on my X account by just sharing it, but I just haven't done it. It just seems gratuitous and just unnecessary. So, okay, so I'm going to run this one because this
it's a different shirt, isn't it? This is not the same day, is it?
I don't believe so, but this shows his ring, I think, and explains why. Oh. Yeah, why. So they're saying, and this explains why it seemed to switch fingers in the assassination video. If you look at the assassination video, and I won't run it because you can see blood in even the close-ups. The ring is here originally, and then it seems to switch over to the other finger. So some people have been posting it saying, see, this whole thing is fake. It's not even real. It's AI, because the ring jumps from one finger to the other as he's falling backward. But here's footage of his ring, and it's like a clip ring of some kind. See, it's not actually all the way around the finger. So it looks like maybe the ring popped off his finger and then it appeared to kind of overlap in the assassination video. You see how it pops off his finger there? So but you know, the thing is, as soon as people start sharing this kind of stuff, this is why we never get to the truth.
Yeah. Well, and it's drama, and it's gross, but it's entertainment. People, you know, are you not entertained? You know, that Gladiator movie quote. But to me, it looks like this is a lot of people that do what Charlie Kirk does have sort of like a fidget toy, for lack of a better term. And as this entire podcast, I've been using this, which is a woodworking clamp that is my fidget toy. It gives my fingers something to do. And that's, to me, what it looked like Charlie Kirk was doing with that. And if it was moving fingers, that's just what he does with it.
The other weird thing that came out was like claims that there had been news stories posted hours, maybe even as early as a day before, talking about the assassination of Charlie Kirk. And I'm like, it can't be possible, because I didn't hear anything about it. If news outlets had been reporting that Charlie Kirk had been shot a day beforehand or 11 hours beforehand, that would have started to spark all kinds of additional coverage because it's a huge story.
Well, and
It has to be a fabrication.
He's not a small time figure. That would have hit headlines.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So but somebody's fabricating the stuff and then pushing it out. And then there's this other claim. Maybe I can find it here. About a book. Yeah, who is Anastasia J. Casey at the Hindustan Times? Is that even a credible news outlet?
Yeah, Hindustan Times is one of those that
Is it a fake news outlet?
No, it's relatively credible. It doesn't normally report on domestic United States things, but it's relatively credible. It wouldn't be my first choice, but I've read them before.
So they've been reporting that there's this book that has come out like instantly. Let's see what the actual story is here. There's the headline. And of course, it's being picked up elsewhere, probably on InfoWars. Who is Anastasia J. Casey? Mysterious book titled The Shooting of Charlie Kirk Raises Questions. And there's the...
It sounds to me
cover.
Like they're picking up on a conspiracy theory that's out there, that they're reporting on somebody else's conspiracy theory.
Yes.
So yeah,
this...
I hadn't heard of this before. I'm not sure if this is worth anybody's time or not.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm just pointing out that there's just a ton of it every single time.
Yeah.
When Trump got shot,
there's
RFK,
a lot of crazy out there. Yeah.
So I just I try to avoid. I'm only talking about it because people keep sending me this stuff.
Yeah.
And I don't like it because this is why you never get the truth. Because when the truth finally does come out, even when investigators present their findings, people never believe it. And so I mean, you probably know this better than I do. But for any of your viewers, it's really important to choose your sources. And I don't mean choose a source that agrees with you. This is a source that, honestly, if you're only, are we frozen? Sorry. If any of us are only reading stuff that we agree with, then we're not doing our job. We're not informing ourselves like adults should. Any source that you agree with 100% of the time should not be your first source. You should be reading stuff that reports stuff that you don't agree with, even though it's true. So I will tell you that Hindustan Times would not be anything that I would send you as something, hey, look at this. If I read something in Hindustan Times, I would confirm it through another more credible source before I would accept it. You know, this apparently was on Amazon September 9th, this book talking about the shooting of Charlie Kirk and his death. And I went to look for it on Amazon. It isn't there.
Oh, so it might be fake news.
Possibly. It says here it's being removed from Amazon. Yeah. Although when I went there are a bunch of other books already. One was produced entirely using AI, it appears.
Probably, because that's actually a thing now.
Yeah. So just the strangest of times.
Speaking of the strangest of times, I don't know how much you want to spend on Charlie Kirk. I guess we still could, but
yeah, no, I think we're going to move on because all last night and now again this, and we had to touch on it because it's.
I think it is an important news story. I think even though I am not remotely a Charlie Kirk fan, I think the violence and the assassination and potentially terrorist act, I think that's a big deal. I don't care who the victim was, who the targets are. This is just as big of a deal as the Minnesota lawmakers. Josh Shapiro was one of the top 3 picks for Kamala Harris's vice president pick. It was her, Tim Walz of Minnesota, and Senator Mark Kelly of Arizona. Yeah. And Shapiro, his house was burned. There were swastikas and other anti-Semitic stuff spray painted on his on the burned house prior to the arson. There's all sorts of really ugly stuff going on, and they're all important. They're all bad.
Yeah. Now, I do want to get into this stuff about Ukraine, which is really the main reason you're here tonight.
And there was a development just in the last few hours. So,
okay. But before we do that, I also want to just make people aware that today, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney held a news conference. It was actually a major announcement. And he was kind of outlining a vision for Canada. Major projects announced. Well, they're in the works, but what he's doing is he's fast tracking these things now because of the tariffs. And as a result, these are the projects that he's fast tracking through this new program. Darlington Nuclear Power Project in Bowmanville. They're going to fast track the approval for the terminal container project, which will expand the Port of Montreal's capacity by 60%. They're going to fast track the new copper mine project in East Central Saskatchewan. Did you want to say something, Mike?
Well, I just wanted to jump in since we're talking about crazies on the right that get a lot of bad press and crazies on the left that get a lot of bad press, just so you don't think I only have one direction that I aim my criticism at. I have a heavy scientific and engineering background, and nuclear power should be one of the green energies that we push. And the crazies on the left are what torpedo that a lot. So
yeah,
for nuclear power, as somebody that values environmental friendliness and clean energy, yeah.
And this will be what they're calling these modular nuclear power facilities.
Some of these smaller ones, yeah.
Yes. So this is the first one in Canada, and that's a major step forward. Canada, like the U.S., has been a leader in nuclear technology and nuclear power. Not so anyway. And so we've also got a mine expansion in Northwest British Columbia, the Wind West Energy Atlantic Energy Project in Nova Scotia. We'll get the fast track. There's also a big carbon capture project in Alberta, Pathways Plus, that Carney is going to fast track. Then, of course, we've been talking about, and this is right up your alley, the Arctic Economic Security Corridor, which means improving military presence up in the Arctic. So that's part of the economic plan.
That's almost vital for strategic defense, not just to Canada, but really all of NATO, because this didn't used to be true, but in our very near future, and it's been increasingly more common that so 50 to 100 years ago, there was half the year you could not sail north of Canada. You could not go from the Atlantic to the Pacific north of Canada. And you can do that most of the year now. The Arctic sea ice has shrunk that much, and it's shrinking every year. And there will be a date in our very near future where you can sail north of Canada all year round, which means that it's going to be a commercial route, and it's going to be a strategic route for military vessels. It's all sorts of vital national importance there.
Yeah, and they're also going to expand the upgrade the Port of Churchill in Manitoba, and then this has been talked about for a long time. I'll excuse the pun, but they're going to fast track this high-speed rail system between Toronto and, I believe, Quebec City. So that's going to be Canada's first high-speed rail, 1,000 kilometers from Toronto to Quebec City. They've talked about it for a long time, but he's kind of cutting through the red tape, and he outlined a lot of this stuff in more detail during his news conference. I'll just run a very brief clip, and then we're going to move on to this stuff on Ukraine.
A very brief anecdote as somebody that has ridden fast rail in Europe several times to various destinations. It's a very good thing. It's a great way to travel. It's comfortable. It's nice. It's fast. It's convenient. Just saying.
Canada's new government also believes that there are several strategies that can be truly transformative for our country. Transformative because they help to connect our regions, because they help unlock our potential across a range of products and markets and technologies. But these strategies are also at an earlier stage, and they require further development. We want to accelerate that development. So today I'm asking Don's team at the Major Project Office to create a business development unit to work with proponents on these transformative strategies to assess how quickly we can transform their potential into reality. And I want to go through these strategies. First, the Major Projects Office will dedicate itself to the development of regulations, financing, structure, and value chains to accelerate Canada's overall production and processing of highly strategic critical minerals. Opportunities include Ontario's Ring of Fire, the mineral-rich Slave geological area in the Northwest Territories, and the Labrador Trough, La Fosse du Labrador, shared by Quebec and Labrador.
Okay, I'm not going to keep running this stuff because we don't have time to go through all this stuff. But what he's really doing is he is cutting through red tape in very creative ways. For instance, if you have multiple levels of approvals that these projects have to go through, instead of getting one set of approvals and then moving on to the next and the next, they're going to run them in parallel. So you get them all done at simultaneously, cutting the approval time way down. So what was taking like 5 and 7 and even 10 years, now maximum of 2. And so this is really huge. I'll say this too. Pierre Poilievre, conservative leader, just days ago came out and he's talking about the economy. And you know what his plan was? And I'm sorry if you don't want to hear this, folks, but this is my assessment. It was stupid because his plan was deport all the immigrants and cancel the temporary foreign worker program so that he can get you all high-paying jobs at Tim Hortons and Booster Juice. I mean, really, if you think about that's what his news conference was about. That's what it came down to. And people are like, yeah, get rid of those immigrants. He's sorry. I'm sorry. You lost me there, Pierre. It just doesn't make sense.
Well, in all respect to Tim Hortons, because there was a Tim Hortons at Kandahar Air Base in Afghanistan while I was there. And it was a breath of fresh air. I really needed it when it was there. I do not aspire to a job at Tim Hortons. I'm sorry.
No, me either. Or, you know, more power to people if they want to work on the farms, but you're not going to be making $50, $70, $80 an hour, you know, picking tomatoes. It doesn't work that way. So if you get rid of all the temporary foreign workers, because that's where most of those people are working, is in jobs like that. There are different tiers to it, and they have some skilled labor. But you get rid of the temporary foreign worker program, you know what you're going to have? Higher food prices and shortages of labor, because a lot of people just don't want to do those jobs. And that's the truth.
We're seeing that in the United States already. Farmers are having a real hard time. Crops are rotting in the field.
Yeah. And but I have to say, like these projects, this is huge. How much money is there and the kinds of jobs that will create, building rail lines, mines, energy projects. If all of that pans out, those are all high paying jobs, highly skilled, a lot of construction, huge investment.
One thing that, and you said the word that I was going to bring up, is that one thing that is missing in the American debate right now is that Canada will almost certainly spend a lot of tax dollars on these projects, but they're not, yes, they're expenditures, but they're also investments. So one of the things that you have to look at is what is the return. So I guess Canada uses the dollar too. So for every dollar that you spend, you use the Canadian dollar, obviously, but for every dollar you spent, how much do you get back? And one of the parts in the United States, we have something that used to be called food stamps. It's now called SWIC, I believe, where it's allowing poor people to buy groceries with government assistance. And they say, look at all this money that we waste on poor people buying food. And it's a big, ugly debate. The part that somehow just never comes back up is that for every dollar that the United States spends on food stamps for the poor, returns $1.70 back to the nation. So you've got 70% return on investment, which anybody in the financial world would think is insane. And it's almost immediate because it goes to the store and then it bounces to the people that work at the store, the people that supply the store, the people that produce the food, that supply the suppliers that supply the store. It's just it bounces around like 10 times just within days. And so it's one of the most effective economic stimulus that generates tax revenue that the United States currently has in its budget. So instead of expenditure, or in addition to expenditure, I hope everybody is thinking about what is the return on this investment that we're going to get. And you mentioned high-paying jobs, and that, of course, will bounce around, because once you start having high-paying jobs, you're going to have to, well, where are these people going to live? Who's going to build those homes? Who's going to maintain those homes for plumbing and electricity and the rest? Where are these people going to send their kids for school? Where are these school teachers going to come from? Where are the grocery stores? Who's going to construct and maintain the roads? There's law firms, banks, hospitals. All of these things were going to be secondary follow-on bounce effects from these investments. And the return on investment on all of this big project stuff is huge, and it's going to still be there in decades from now. It's not going to just be this year and next. It's going to still be there in 2040 and 2050.
And some of these projects that they're fast tracking, it's not all government money. A lot of this will attract investment. Some of this involves the private sector. So it wasn't even about just spending government money. It's about setting up this office that's going to help facilitate the approvals of these projects, to cut through the politics, the red tape, all of the things standing in the way of these things proceeding. So that's what this is largely about too. And that won't cost taxpayers anymore. That will cost us all less. So this is a much smarter plan than anything we ever saw from Justin Trudeau. And I know that everybody thinks that Mark Carney is this evil liberal, but this is way more conservative in terms of economics than what we've seen from Pierre Poilievre, in my opinion. And you can hate me all you want, but I have to be honest. That's where I sit with what I heard from him today. I think it was truly visionary, kind of like the Trans-Canada Highway, or joining the country together by rail and unifying everybody. So I think this is really kind of a good thing. So let's take a little break. Then we're going to come back and we'll touch on this stuff out of Ukraine, because it's huge, and some people think that it's maybe a prelude to war. We'll get Mike's thoughts on that on the other side of this.
Maverick News. The world is watching.
Okay, so yeah, actually huge developments over in Europe with Ukraine and what's going on in Poland. So you said there was something new just within the last few hours. What are you talking about?
So I don't know how much you mentioned in a previous night, but night before last, it's happened before where Russian drones have strayed, and they, for either crappy Russian drones that can't find their target, or because they're the ones that they're shooting are not expensive, so you're going to expect more misses. Even America on cheap drones would expect more misses on something that's cheap. They've wandered into Romania, they've wandered into Moldova, they've wandered into Poland before. And some of this is electronic spoofing from Ukraine, where instead of shooting at a drone, you're going to spoof it and it'll go off course. Those usually don't cross the borders. They usually do this weird because you confuse them and they fly in circles and then they crash. But if you look, I don't know if I sent you that picture of the tracks, but this, there's no way to view this other than Russia deliberately sent at least 19 drones and or cruise missiles. We don't know the makeup of all 19 of them. It might have all been drones. There might have been a couple of cruise missiles, but 19 of them appear to be deliberately shot into Poland. This is obviously anybody that thinks Putin wants peace. This is not the way a Putin searching peace would act. This is deliberate provocation. This is testing the waters to see what we'll tolerate. This is a little bit of, okay, what will their defenses do if we do this? There's all sorts of things wrapped up in this, but this is a deliberate act of aggression by Russia on a NATO nation of Poland. The status of NATO, I mentioned Article 5 earlier, that's only been invoked once. I got a little conflicting numbers on what we call Article 4, which is if a NATO nation feels threatened in any way of varying severity other than we are under attack right now, come help us, which is Article 5. Article 4 has only been invoked either 8 or 9 times. And Poland invoked Article 4. The previous time that was invoked was on February 24th, 2022, on Russia's big invasion of Ukraine. And there was no immediate change to NATO's stance based on that, because after the 2022 Article 4 invocation, in January 2022, NATO had 2 combat units, for lack of a better word. They're bigger than units. They're made up of multiple units. Formations would be a better term. There were 2 NATO formations on various things that could be considered bordering Russia. There was one in the Baltics and kind of shared itself with Poland, and one kind of down in Romania that kind of shared itself with Poland. After February 2022, NATO boosted this to 8, and they might have boosted it up to 10. There's a couple of conflicting things that I read. There's at least 8 combat NATO formations bordering Russia, guarding the wall, for if you want to use that imagery. One of those was effective in shooting down some of the drones, spoofing the other drones, tracking some further ones that didn't appear to actually have a target in mind, so we kind of just let them run. There were F-16s and F-35s from at least 3 nations, Poland, the Netherlands, and the United States. And there was a Polish AWACS plane, possibly a Romanian AWACS plane, and at least 1 aerial tanker that I'm not sure of the nationality of. So this was a big response. It was, I mean, Poland was you could actually consider Poland to have been under Russian attack at that moment. Since then, there's been a couple of things. Sergei Lavrov says those were not Russian drones, like he does, just denying reality. And, some people are going to believe him. And so there was a lot of that kind of thing going on. Some people might not be aware that Russia is running a joint exercise inside of Belarus, where it's a training exercise where instead of the contract soldiers that Russia is sending into Ukraine, these are conscript soldiers that some of them have been sent into Ukraine, but Russia is not supposed to legally send them into Ukraine to fight, but sometimes they do. These are mostly conscript soldiers, but it's big. It's like 40 to 100,000 Russian and Belarusian soldiers on a joint military exercise in the western port of Belarus, right on the portion of Belarus, right on the Polish border. A giant Zapad is the exercise, the annual exercise. A giant Zapad exercise was part of the masking of the buildup to forces prior to the 22 invasion of Ukraine. So what happened just in the last few hours is Poland has moved 40,000. We're not talking 2,000. We're not talking 300. 40,000. That is 4 divisions of soldiers have been moved to the Belarusian border. The border to Belarus has been closed permanently. These troops are digging in and preparing for combat because Poland is taking this seriously. NATO is taking this seriously. Russia attacked Poland. This might blow over. Russia might or might not go. This might just be Putin deciding whether he can pull some strings, but there's a lot going on because there is now, in February of 2022, there was talk about closing the skies and a no-fly zone over Ukraine. That was probably should have been the best choice in hindsight, but they didn't go for it. They didn't do. They're like, we can't justify that, or we couldn't get enough people on board. Whatever their reasons, they didn't do it. But now, because even the slow Shahed drones fly at several hundred miles per hour, and they don't take a lot of time to cross a certain amount of territory. So you might not have a whole lot of warning. And if you consider Ukraine its own air zone for Ukraine to defend all the way up to the Polish-Ukrainian or Polish-Romanian border, then what happens if a drone gets within 5 miles, but it's really actually going after a target in Poland or Romania? You have no warning. So there is currently talk of some sort of buffer zone that NATO will start patrolling the skies inside of Ukraine. I don't know if that'll happen, but the talk is a lot more serious than I've seen it at any other point in the last 3.5 years. And this is a big deal. So yeah, I don't know what to make of this. It's a little bit, as a former military person, one thing that military people don't like to see is things starting to go sideways, because if you're in uniform and you're in a combat, organization like a military, guess who's the first person that's going to be in danger? So, as a military person, I really hope this does not go sideways, but it looks like it's heading in that direction. This is a big deal. This is one of the most serious points of this war so far.
So can you explain for the viewers, if you're able, what Article 4 involves?
Article 4 is a nation that considers a serious threat to its sovereignty can invoke Article 4 and force all NATO nations to come together in a planning situation to assess what's going on, plan ways forward. Like I said, there was no immediate stance until today, no immediate posture change until today, because we already have 8 combat formations and they seem to have handled the drone incursion. But the fact that they're calling for, like, this is serious, we need to rethink what we're doing. This is going to be ongoing, and it's going to be involving all of NATO nations.
But we've seen drones,
onesies and twosies.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
And so is that the difference because of the number of drones all at once this time?
So NATO is tracking the air war over Ukraine. We also have tie-ins to Ukraine's radar network that we helped them build. Ukraine is using a lot of Western radars right now, and including to a widely distributed, like, acoustic sensor system. They have tens of thousands of acoustic sensors to track Shahed drones as well. So we know what's going on. If there is a onesie or a twosie that crosses the border, so like I said, sometimes they were just duds. The control system went bad, or it was an interception where Ukraine might have winged it, but it's still kind of sort of flying. There's some that were actually intercepted over Ukraine, but then the way that it was flying, it kind of arced into Romania or Poland. That's happened more than once. So until now, there haven't been anything that were obviously Russia targeted Poland, which on any of the other ones that I can think of, I don't think anyone could say with a straight face that wasn't trying to sell you something. But this time I don't think there's any alternative interpretation. This was a deliberate act of Russia sending 19 drones or cruise missiles into Poland.
So
did you get that picture that I sent of the tracks of that night?
I don't think did you email that to me?
I would have emailed it to you, I think.
I don't believe I received it. If you want to email it to me now, I can get it up on the screen.
Let me see if I can get my sent stuff.
I'm checking for it.
Yeah, it would have been last night's Russia attack as the subject line.
Okay.
September 10th is when I sent it.
Okay. And this was, there it is. I've got it. Okay. Easy enough to bring that up.
I don't know how your geography is, but this is, I should actually pull this up. This is obviously a map of Ukraine with vampire tracks. Vampire is a hostile target that is about to get you. And you can see that several tracks, they didn't curve, they didn't swerve, they didn't do anything that looked like they were anything but deliberate. They weren't spoofed. There was one that crossed the border into Belarus and then into Poland. Actually, it looks like there were several that did that.
See if I can get it up larger. Are you still there? Yeah, okay.
I'm still here.
And here we go.
Oh, I guess it's smaller than I thought it was. Yeah, so obviously Ukraine, it's the northwest corner of this picture that you're interested in.
Here we go.
You can see Kiev right in the middle there.
Mm-hmm.
But all of those tracks on that left, so the Ukrainian territory is shaded. It's lightly shaded. And you can see on the west where all of those crossed into Poland. Northwest is Poland. Southwest will be Moldova and Romania.
So these are just from last night?
This was night before last. This was that night, yes. Wow. You can see all the launching points, or at least the points at which Ukrainian systems started to track them, or at least officially track them.
So you can see why they would be concerned.
But this is almost a nightly occurrence in Ukraine, just so you know, this sort of spaghetti track over Ukraine. If you're a civilian in Ukraine, this is your new normal.
Well, now, so how should we interpret this? Is this an escalation? Is this a prelude?
It's absolutely an escalation. Whether it's a prelude or not, we have yet to see. If it was a possible prelude, Putin still has the chance to say this is not the right time. I am not a Trump fan, but Trump has been increasingly frustrated with Putin. And Trump himself said this was, I don't remember what his exact words were, but Trump was not happy with this. I don't know how much you are aware of how different NATO nations relate with Trump, some more successfully than others. But Poland has always been a big Trump supporter. I don't know if that is deliberate or it's absolutely deliberate, but I don't know the reasons behind it. They might have just been, Trump's going to give us stuff. We're going to be flattering and all that kind of stuff. And Trump was big. Trump in his first term helped Poland transition from MiG-29s to F-16s, and then approved Poland's purchase of F-35s, which Poland is already flying. They were going to name one of their air bases after Donald Trump. It was going to be a Polish air base that was Donald Trump Air Base. So that would have tickled Trump in all of the right spots for Poland to get what they needed. Poland is a big fan of Trump. They push all of Trump's correct buttons to make Trump happy with Poland. So I don't think Trump would be terribly thrilled with one of his favorite NATO nations getting attacked by Russia.
So maybe we should name an airport in Canada Donald
You're
Trump
not
International
wrong.
Airport. And
It depends on what kind of route you want to take. Uh,
I'm willing to try it. I'm going to
You can always
suggest
name it back later.
it. Oh, man. Okay. Yeah. Well, I think, but didn't Trump just say about a week ago that who was it that came from Poland? Wasn't Donald Tusk, was it?
I
But
saw Lech Walesa visiting the United States recently.
did
I
he?
don't know if
Oh.
that was it.
No, this was just a week ago. Wasn't Lech Walesa. It was one of the top politicians. I can't remember who, but
I don't
Trump
remember
said
either.
in the news conference, I remember him saying that, you know, they're big on supporting Poland, and if they want more troops to be sent, he said that they would even send more troops. And then
One
all
of-
this stuff happened later.
One of the things in 2020, because Trump is not a big fan of Germany for any number of reasons, but one of the things Trump was starting to do, the motions had actually begun, was we have a lot of American troops of all branches, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, inside of Germany. This is a legacy of World War II and the Cold War, and mostly in Western Germany because Cold War. The idea that Trump had was to move the bulk of them, like 70-80% of them, into Poland. So this is not, if Trump said that a week ago, this is not a new thought for Trump.
Yeah. So things, I mean, Alaska meeting Putin, then all the European leaders accompany Zelensky to the White House, all that stuff. So much coverage around that. It was like political theater. And then in the end, Putin just escalated the drone attacks that would just increase them. Then even bombed the U.S. factory inside Ukraine. It's like he's thumbing his nose at Trump, laughing at him.
Yep, he's seeing how much he can get away with. I hope that there is somebody that has Donald Trump's ear that is saying Putin's playing with you, he's making you look like an idiot. Because if there's one thing that Trump does not like, is to have people laugh at him. And if he looks like an idiot, people are going to laugh at him. And that's kind of where we're at right now, because he was so fawning on Putin for so many months. And everybody that has been watching Putin for the last 20 years is like, that is not going to be how this unfolds, Donald Trump. That's just not reality. And so now we're seeing that. Putin never wanted to have peace. He was trying to buy time. There was some performative stuff in the Pokrovsk direction. I don't remember if you and I spoke of this one-on-one or if it was on the podcast I was on last, but one of the things that Russia has been doing in the Pokrovsk direction, certainly, but also in some of the other directions, I'd like to say Kupiansk, where they will send a couple of soldiers, like 1, 2, 3 soldiers, into Ukrainian land to climb a building and put a Russian flag on top, and then they can have video saying Russian troops are in yada yada village. Now there are only 2 or 3 Russian soldiers, and they're inside of Ukrainian territory, so Ukraine takes them out using what is now being referred to as big bada boom sanctions against Russia. That they're sanctioning those Russian soldiers, and they don't make it back, but Russia has the video of the Russian flag on behind Ukrainian lines. They did some other performative stuff with some smaller formations northeast of Pokrovsk. This is in the southern Donetsk region, where they apparently made some big gains, but the Russian formations were not strong. And so the Ukrainian counterattacks were just ripping them to shreds and surrounding some formations, completely cutting off some supply lines to some of the areas. And then some that were technically still Russian-held territory were so narrow that the threat of Ukrainian artillery and drones and even the occasional Bradley or tank from Ukraine, there were no Russian supplies reaching the Russian formations. So there have been all sorts of high amounts of Russian surrendering soldiers already in that direction. And this was all before the August meeting in Alaska, that what Putin wanted to say was like, look, we're advancing rapidly, and it was all theater. And of course, Putin is sacrificing his own soldiers for theater. This is not the actions of a person that wants peace.
And I don't understand strategically how this would benefit, how it would benefit Russia at this point to try to expand the war in some way by like engaging with Poland next. Like this would, it seems to me like they have their hands more than full with Ukraine alone. And then if they overplay their hand again, if Putin overplays his hand and triggers some sort of an Article 5 response because they do something in Poland, like this just escalates to a point where I don't know how. Am I missing something here? None of this seems to make any sense to me.
I don't think what Putin's doing in Ukraine is logical, because he's obviously not able to make the military gains he thought he was going to be able to make. What I think this is a part of their disinformation campaign that they've been doing for 15 years at this point, a little bit longer, almost 20 years at this point, where they are trying to confuse and upset and cause chaos inside of NATO nations. I don't know if Putin, this is speculation on my part, whether Putin might be thinking I can start going into Poland and that will scare Donald Trump into forcing some sort of peace that is heavily in my favor, overriding Ukrainian objections to whatever you might think. Speaking of 9/11, that rage that I felt when America was attacked, that is the exact same rage that Ukrainians feel each and every day with Russian attacks. On 9/11, it was 19 terrorists that took over 4 airplanes and knocked down 2 buildings. But this is hundreds of thousands. I think Russia currently has 500,000 combat troops inside of Ukraine, and they've already taken over 1 million casualties. So they have cycled through at least 1.5 million soldiers into Ukraine. That's big. It's huge. It's 3.5 years of direct assaults on their country. So imagine the rage that you would feel if somebody did that to Quebec or Ontario or Saskatchewan. Vancouver, if they started launching drones into Vancouver every night. So just imagine the rage that Ukrainians feel about this. So Putin is not going to get Ukraine to surrender on terms favorable to Russia. That's what Putin's been trying to get Trump to do, is to get diplomatic accomplishments through Trump that he is not able to achieve through combat. Because he was demanding territory that his troops are not currently on. I don't know if people have remembered that or even noticed. And regime change that he can't accomplish. He wants to overthrow Zelensky, which he can't accomplish militarily. All of these things that he can't do is what he's demanding. So if the gambit of a few drones into Poland is meant to get Donald Trump to say this ends now, we're going to take peace, regardless of the terms, that would be a horrifying outcome, in my opinion, because that's just how you invite Putin to demand more. So I certainly hope that NATO and Trump respond strongly to this. A no-fly zone in the western part of Ukraine would be a good start. But if Russia goes into Poland, I don't think NATO would have any choice. I think they would have to go hard. Biden had threatened this already, that if Russia, through the threat of their nukes, that if Russia popped a nuke at any point or blew a nuclear power station, it would be viewed as a direct attack on NATO, because radiation and fallout does not know about borders. And we would do a massive conventional response, and we would completely take apart any and all Russian forces inside of Ukraine. They would just be gone. And if you saw what Israel was able to accomplish over Iran, with fewer than 40 F-35s and only about 150 other jets like F-15s and F-16s, They were able to achieve air superiority in a matter of hours, and that air superiority is where you are mostly owning the sky. But that is just one step on the ladder. Israel was able to achieve air dominance over the entire nation of Iran within a matter of days. And this is Iran that uses Russian gear. They've got S-300s and S-400s. They've got flankers, Su-30s. They might or might not have Su-35s already. They have some of the best gear, some crappy gear too, but they have small amounts of the best gear that Russia has. And Israel, with only about 200 jets, was able to completely dominate them in the matter of days. The amount of force that NATO has available in Europe is just unbelievably greater than everything that Israel has available to it. There is no doubt in my mind that a NATO response, conventional response to a Russian attack, would be able to completely tear apart Putin's entire army inside of Ukraine in a matter of days.
There's also this story that you brought to my attention involving this nun who was, I guess she was with the Russian Orthodox Church, but in the United States. Is that correct?
Yes. So this is kind of a background that I sent you a different one that detailed the Russian sabotage and political machinations inside of Western nations, including Canada. For the England, the United States is every Western nation. One of the things about the former Soviet Union that people get wrong is thinking that the Soviet Union was an atheist nation. It was not. The vast majority of Russians were and remain religious as part of the Russian Orthodox Church. And under the Tsars, the Tsar was a divine right king that was head of the Russian Orthodox Church. In the 20s, the Bolsheviks disbanded, or at least tried to disband, the Russian Orthodox Church. But in 1940s, Stalin reinstalled the Russian Orthodox Church as an official arm of the Soviet government under the KGB. So just so you know, this situation is still how the Russian government works, that the Russian Orthodox Church is an arm of the KGB, and it has been since the 1940s. So this is one of the reasons why Ukraine has made the Russian Orthodox Church illegal, because they're KGB agents by definition. But the Russian Orthodox Church, because it's one version of Eastern Orthodoxy, there are a lot of fervent's the wrong word, devout believers would probably be a better term. There's a lot of sincere followers of Eastern Orthodoxy, and that includes under the Russian Patriarch. That's not the only version of Orthodoxy out there, but there are those out there. This gives you an idea of the reach of the Russian Orthodox Church, that they are reaching into a Western nation and going after an American citizen. This lady's an American citizen, even though she's living currently in Europe, and they are able to silence her. She's an American citizen, but this is Russian KGB censorship on an American citizen.
This is Sister Vasilarin, an American nun known for teaching about the Eastern Orthodox faith, and a social media influencer, essentially. And she's been, I guess, essentially silenced by the
Russian
officials.
Patriarch. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Here, I'll just let a little of this roll.
Good morning, everyone. This is Sister Vasa. I am part of the Orthodox Church, and specifically, I am under a bishop of the Orthodox Church of Ukraine nowadays, because the church that I was born into, of which my father was a priest also, this church jurisdiction actually made it impossible for me to remain just recently, because first the synod of this church tried to silence me, to forbid me to do any internet activity that I've been doing for well over 10 years. I wasn't seeking to leave this church of my upbringing into which I was born. I wasn't telling anybody to leave it, nor was I planning to leave it, but it became impossible for me to exist, to be at all me. I do not get bullied by a church authority that has a problem with me stating my position as far as the Russian Church's not Orthodox teaching or heretical teaching, in my point of view, about this war against Ukraine being a holy war.
So she has been critical of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. So they're like, basically they're kicking her out of the church. Silence.
Well,
She's
she
leaving.
had been ordered by one of the bishops was ordered by the Patriarch Kirill to silence her, that she was no longer allowed to have an online presence, and she was ordered to report to a cloistered convent where she would have been completely cut off from the outside world. And that's what her orders were. I grew up Catholic, so that is, but it's a similar concept where you've got bishops and clergy, and the vocations of nun and priest underneath of the bishops are subject to the bishop's orders, and that's what they tried to do to her. And now she evidently switched, because there was a lot of clergy and believers inside of Ukraine that said, no, we're not doing that. We're going to break off. There's Greek Orthodox, there's Egyptian Orthodox. They might be called Coptic by some people. There's all sorts of Eastern Orthodox churches out there. But this just gives you an example of what the vast oddball areas that Russia is reaching into, trying to influence the West. That first they wanted her to toe the Kremlin line and spread Kremlin propaganda under the guise of religious authority. And then they tried to silence her and cut her off from the world. Good on her for like, no. But that's the world we live in. So it's a little bit of an individual example of what a lot of Ukrainians were going through, because even with their independence, the church of their youth and their upbringing is the church that they go to. It's what they're familiar with. It's what they've always done. It's what their parents did. And now it's corrupted and tainted. And so it's just, it's a microcosm of what is happening not only in Ukraine, but even worldwide, where they've got influencers everywhere, and they're trying to reach out everywhere. They're trying to push buttons. They're trying to alter things. So it's a vast Kremlin outreach attempt. Their success has been varied. Obviously, they didn't shut her up.
And what about this story? That you also sent me, the sabotage operations.
So this is ongoing. There was, for instance, in 2014, there was an explosion in a warehouse, an ammunition warehouse in the Czech Republic, that turned out to be deliberate sabotage. The Russian agents that carried out that sabotage for the ammunition warehouse in the Czech Republic were the same people that were poisoning people in the United Kingdom, that were trying to silence, I believe that was a Russian dissident, if I'm remembering the situation correctly. But there was an influence operation for Brexit, because if they can sow chaos inside of the European Union and dissent among NATO nations, they're going to do it. There is varying conclusions on whether it was the Russian influence that put Brexit over the top, but it was certainly not expected to succeed prior to that vote. That Brexit was not expected to happen, and then it did. All Russia needed in that Brexit vote was a couple of percent, because it was going to be a close vote either way. And that's why some people are saying, yeah, Russian influence put it over the top, because all they needed was a couple of percent. It's widespread. It's ongoing. They've been trying to buy influencers in the United States and Canada. You know that all too well. Charlie Kirk was part of that. And I'm going to be speaking ill of the dead, but he was spreading Kremlin propaganda more than once. He was part of the Trump inner circle, along with J.D. Vance and Pete Hegseth and a few other people that were very much anti-Ukraine and pro-Russia. It's everywhere.
So you're seeing, you're saying that there's really Russian influence in what has become an international network of influencers and political activist groups that are, I guess.
So it's been a while since we've covered this, but there's a concept called hybrid war that Russia actually has a term for, and it's been around in Russian for a while. It's called maskirovka. The first time I came across that word was actually in the 1980s when I read the Tom Clancy book Red Storm Rising. And whatever you think of Tom Clancy, he actually had done a significant amount of homework on the Soviet Union and the Soviet military. The Maskirovka thing where they're trying to do a cover. That's why I said that this is a pod exercise in Belarus was used as a cover. That's one example. But hybrid warfare includes sabotage and assassination through poison, like I mentioned with Czech in the United Kingdom. It includes influence operations like Charlie Kirk or other influencers inside the United States and Canada. It includes attempts on clergy like this nun. But it also includes other form of warfare that the Russia did a cyber attack on Estonia. I'd like to say it was 2004, but don't quote me on that. You can do Russian cyber attack Estonia and the year come up. It's going to be one of the first couple of hits. And that was huge. It was a watershed moment in the world of cyber warfare because it completely changed how the United States and the West approach cyber warfare.
2007, by the way.
Yeah. And nowadays, that sort of massive attack that brought down nearly in the entire government and power grid of Estonia nowadays might actually be considered an act of war. Estonia might have actually today, if it happened today, might have invoked Article 5 because it was seriously dangerous. There was a lot of things that Estonia simply could not do. Controlling their military, controlling their police, controlling their banks, power, just everything. And it was a massive attack. Now our cyber defensive have gotten significantly better since then. But even in the 2016 election, and again in every election since then, Fancy Bear and all those other Russian hackers, there's a building in St. Petersburg, we know where it is, where they direct these attacks on American elections. That influencers and all that kind of stuff, because they have like 30 Twitter accounts going per cyber warfare person in Russia. Pulled that number out on my, but it's massive and it's widespread and it's all of these realms of things that we wouldn't necessarily consider war in our daily life, but Russia considers war. That there's a reason why some people think that we're already in World War III, and we have been for many years, that Russia's been attacking us for many years. We just haven't responded yet.
Yeah. So, where does that leave us tonight with all of these developments?
Your danger light should be reading red right now. Whether it develops into something, or as military people say, whether this goes sideways or not, remains to be seen. This might just be an incident that we see, we meet, and then it fades away in a rearview mirror. Or it might be the start of something big, and it's only days old. It remains to be seen how this is going to affect things, how the United States responds, how Donald Trump specifically responds. In the last 6 to 8 months, Pete Hegseth has gone rogue and done a couple of anti-Ukraine things on his own. For instance, halting weapon shipment to Ukraine that he had no authority to do, and Trump didn't know about. And halting information sharing that Trump didn't know about or authorize, and Pete Hegseth had no authority to do. There's been a couple of instances like that already. So whether he goes rogue is going to be a different question. This is one of the reasons why some of the video in the August meeting with Putin that gave me some hope is that the person that he had on his side was the pro-Ukraine former Senator Marco Rubio, now Secretary of State. that Trump had sidelined some of his anti-Ukraine folks like Hegseth and JD Vance. So where this goes, I don't know. Trump has been moving away from Russia gradually. Poland's one of his favorite nations. We'll see where this goes. I hope that Trump will stand up for Poland and force Putin to back off. The ideal outcome is that Trump forces Putin to back off, for what it's worth.
I'm afraid to ask, but I'm going to. What's going on in Venezuela in your view?
I have no idea. That's something that I follow a little bit. I know, is it Bolsonaro? Am I remembering? Names are not
That's Brazil.
Yeah.
So that's
Venezuela. Sorry,
Venezuela.
Yeah.
So in Brazil, Bolsonaro in 2022 was accused of trying to execute a coup because he lost the election, wouldn't accept it. And so now he's been sentenced today, I believe, to 27 years in prison. So that's pretty significant. That sort of has echoes of Donald Trump and J6.
Yeah.
So that's happening there. But no, I'm talking about Venezuela and all the warships around Venezuela, the war on the cartels, the blowing the fishing boat out of the water, the release of that video. I have my own take on it, but I throw it over to you to help us make sense of this.
Well, we'll see where this goes. It's not the first time that American warships and warplanes have been active against the drug cartels, drug shipments through that part of the world. The drug cartels have had increasingly sophisticated delivery methods by sea, fast boats, narco subs, things like that. The criticism of the Trump administration for the targeting of that boat, I found some of this details only came out after the fact, where the Trump administration was claiming this great victory of blowing up this boat. It turns out there had been some warning shots fired. This is relatively normal for, you need to turn around kind of stuff. There were warning shots fired. The boat had turned around, and then we destroyed them. That is legally and internationally problematic. I don't have enough information to be confident in my assessment, but the criticism that this was an illegal act by the United States has some validity, pending other details coming out. So the laws of war that govern legal and illegal acts, there's a reason this is out, because the United States military has a lethal mission. We have lethal tools at our disposal, that when we do things right, the right people die or don't die. When we do things wrong, the wrong people die. And so the weight of these decisions, the military definitely takes these seriously. Anybody in uniform is going to be very, very serious about these things. One of the rules that governs this, the international law that governs how lawful good nations, good guy nations, white hat nations conduct military operations, have a reason they exist, and that usually there's some historic event that we're like, that's not okay, and we need to make a law about this. So one of the it shows up in very specific rules, and it also shows up in the ethical underpinning of the international laws of war. These are various Geneva Conventions all the way from the 1860s to the most recent was somewhere in the 21st century. I'd have to look up the date. For instance, the one that governs when Russia blew the hydroelectric dam on the Dnieper River inside of Ukraine, that was a specific war crime under a Geneva Convention that was signed in the late 1970s. So there's some specifics, but one of the things that Geneva says is that even though we don't mention them in specifics, we have these basic ethical underpinnings that even though we don't mention it, a future action could still be considered a war crime based on these underpinnings. And one of the things is that when an enemy combatant is no longer engaging in combat, they are no longer a valid target. So for instance, if a fighter pilot is engaging in combat in, whatever, either a long range or what the, a furball, the classic dogfight that we might think of, if their plane is damaged or destroyed and they eject and they are now under a canopy floating down to earth, they are not a valid target. They are considered no longer a combatant, and under Geneva, they are considered a protected person, that if you shoot at them, you are committing a war crime. Now, you can contrast this to the classic airborne troops that if you send infantry inside of a plane and they jump out of the plane under a canopy, they are valid targets. If they are under a canopy floating down to earth, you are fully within your rights to shoot at them. So you can see how the international law makes clear distinctions, even for something that might actually be quite similar, a person hanging from a parachute. In one sense, they're a legal target. In another sense, they're a war crime if you shoot at them. So this boat, the fact that it turned around and it was heading home, meant that it had clearly signaled that it was no longer engaging in combat. This is not a slam dunk that it is an illegal act. There are other things that can affect what's going on here. But people that are criticizing the Trump administration for this act, there's some very serious, very, very sober reasons why they're criticizing it. And hopefully my contrast between the pilot bailing out of their airplane and the paratroopers, hopefully that gets the message across. You can let me know if you need further clarification, but yeah.
No, that's pretty clear. And I appreciate you being, I think, fair and honest with your assessment on that, because, I have real concerns personally about what I'm seeing going on down there with the huge buildup of military forces, the troops going into Puerto Rico. They're staging for something, whether it's just a show of strength to try to affect some sort of change, or whether they're really planning to invade Venezuela. I don't know, but it seems like, forgive forgive the pun or the phrase, but seems like overkill to some degree.
Yes. Well, we have, strangely enough, one of the things that we're learning from Ukraine is that a significant portion of our military is meant to fight a big war against a peer nation. So our big Burke destroyers, our high-tech fighter jets, our precision high-cost weaponry is meant to fight a nation like China or Russia. But if those are the tools you have, and you want to go after a smaller target, this is one of the things that we struggled with in Afghanistan specifically, because the Taliban were never even remotely close to a peer opponent. It was always asymmetrical warfare. We were always looking for a different way to go at that particular military problem post 9/11. So the big guns against a small target is not necessarily an indication that this is a massive invasion. However, Trump, both during the campaign and since taking office, has threatened to attack foreign citizens inside of sovereign territory of a foreign nation. Whether you think that might be justified in the drug war or not, that is highly problematic. And Mexico, I know specifically, has stated, if you go after, you do not have our permission to use military force on our soil. We're happy to cooperate with you because Mexico's been cooperating with us for a long time now. But unilaterally using force inside of a foreign country, you can see that's a problem. What if the United States military started striking specific targets inside of Canada? How would you take that? Probably not too great.
No.
And you would have justification for thinking that. Now, if I said they were mafioso or if it was a drug lab that was producing drugs, maybe that mitigates it, maybe it doesn't. But just doing it unilaterally is not the way that you win friends and influence people. So I have my problems with this. If there's a drug boat in international waters, but even still, that's problematic because these are civilians. But under some of the rules of war, if you have irregular forces, because the Taliban was not a state, it was not a nation state, and going after terrorists, you're not going after a foreign army. They're considered irregular forces. There's a lot of fine detail here. It's a very serious subject. By necessity, it's a complicated subject. I think the critics have some valid points, and I don't think I have all the information yet.
Okay. With that, we'll wrap up for tonight. Mike, is there anything else you'd like to add or think that I might have missed with you?
Take Russia seriously. Don't buy Russia's lines. That incursion to Poland was really bad news, and it hasn't gotten nearly the press it deserves. But the stuff that's been overshadowing it, certainly here in the United States and evidently in Canada as well, is also serious. The assassination of a civilian, whatever you might think of him, on a college campus at a public event where there was nothing violent going on, whatever you might think of the rhetoric or the ideas, a violent assassination on American soil on a university campus is not okay. We need to figure something out. I hesitate to use Lincoln's words of better angels of our nature because he used that in his first inaugural address and it did not turn out the way he wanted it to. That was the start of the very, very bloody war. So I hesitate that we need to connect with the better angels of our nature because that's not been historically successful rhetoric. But it is a nice turn of phrase. And thank you, Mr. Lincoln.
I hope this isn't a prelude to a civil war.
Well, and they've been threatening that for a while. The militias, the sovereign citizens. And this is not new to the Trump era. This goes back to the Timothy McVeigh person in the 1990s that if people have forgotten, he was the one that blew up the federal building in Oklahoma. He wasn't the start of that. He was radicalized by various people in, we call them sovereign citizens now. They were survivalists and militias before that. The Turner Diaries, if people know what that is, that was one of the books, is a novel that predicted and then detailed what an American race war would look like, because these people are white nationalists. They're very racist. Things like Great Replacement Theory and blood and soil citizenship are central to the ideology. These people think that we're already in a civil war. So make that for what you will. Like I said, it's been decades already. They've been cranks on the extreme right. And we haven't had a civil war yet. I just hope it doesn't go mainstream. And I certainly don't hope that an act of domestic terrorism is a catalyst for that. That's not okay. But historically has precedent. 1914, if people are not aware. The shots of a single gunman sparked a horrendous world war.
Yes. Well, we're seeing it up here in Canada too. So we'll pray for peace, and I'll see everybody back here tomorrow night, 7 p.m. Eastern, on the flip side.
This has been a Maverick Multimedia production.